Hey, it's Lacey. My family cut me off for being embarrassing, but then they booked a $160 million venue I secretly own. It felt like a slap in the face, but what hurt more wasn't the rejection. It was the years of manipulation, the way they used me, and then turned their backs. Why would a family do that to one of their own? Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted the most? Time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, I really want to know. I stood there staring at the invitation in my hands, the ornate paper mocking me with its gold lettering and cheerful tone. My name wasn't on it. Not even a faint mention of me, like I had never existed. My family, who had always been my anchor, had officially cut me off. It wasn't just the omission from the guest list. It was the final nail in the coffin. I could feel the weight of it all bearing down on me, a bitter sting of rejection I couldn't shake off. The invitation wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the confirmation that the people who had once been my whole world wanted nothing to do with me anymore. They had discarded me for making the choice to follow my passion in hospitality, an industry they deemed beneath them. In their eyes, I was a failure. No one in our family had ever stepped away from the family business, and my decision to build something of my own was seen as a betrayal. I had broken the unspoken rule that one must always follow the family legacy, no matter how outdated or stifling it was. The sting of their disapproval wasn't new, but this was the tipping point. This moment was unlike any other. This was deliberate, cold rejection. No more subtle hints, no more backhanded comments. This was their final verdict. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, anything. But instead, I just stood there, motionless, my thoughts swirling in chaos. The apartment around me, with its sleek modern lines and glass walls, felt suffocating now. The view of Los Angeles, the city I had built my life in, a city where no one knew me as Lacey Blake, just a woman making her own way, felt hollow. It had always been this way, hadn't it? Family gatherings, each one a little worse than the last. Every time I walked into the room, there were the whispers, the glances that lasted just a moment too long, filled with judgment. My father's dismissive stares, Serena's cold smile. The entire family had made it clear that I didn't belong. But this was different. This was a final act. And now, standing alone in my penthouse, the weight of their rejection fueled something inside of me that had been simmering for too long. A fire, a determination. It was time to take control. A message pinged on my phone. Serena's name flashed across the screen, and my stomach twisted. I should have ignored it. I should have. But I didn't. Maybe next year? The words were sharp, cutting, a final jab. I could practically hear her voice dripping with condescension as she typed it. Maybe next year, she had written, implying that I didn't have what it took to belong with them, that my success wasn't enough, not enough to get me an invitation. It was the last straw, the final straw in a long history of disrespect and pain. I read her words again, and a fire ignited inside me. This was it. The moment I had waited for. The moment where I took back everything. All of it. I walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling city. The lights of Los Angeles twinkled like 1,000 stars, each one reminding me that I had built something here. I wasn't just Lacey Blake, the daughter of a successful family. I was Lacey Blake, the woman who would make her own legacy. The revenge wasn't going to be immediate. It wasn't going to be petty. It was going to be strategic. I wasn't going to just show up at the family reunion and demand a seat at the table. Number I would own the table. I had already started. My investments had grown, and so had my power. The hotel and resorts I had silently built over the years weren't just businesses to me. They were the key. Maybe next year. Serena's words echoed in my mind. No, not next year. Right now. I wasn't just going to get my revenge. I was going to control it. I wasn't some outsider. I wasn't going to be the one pushed to the side any longer. I was going to walk into that reunion with my head held high, not as an unwanted guest, but as the woman who would own the place they were meeting. I needed to make sure everything was in place. My assistant, Marcus, would help. He was always on top of things, and he'd know how to handle the situation without raising suspicion. As I sat back down, my phone buzzed again, this time from Marcus. He had news. I opened the message, my pulse quickening. There was something off. The weight of my decision hit me all at once. The plan was set in motion, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just going to be simple payback. I felt the pressure of my choices mounting. What had I gotten myself into? I couldn't stop staring at the message from Darlie. It was the kind of message that cut through your defenses, leaving a raw, jagged wound behind. "Maybe next year," she wrote. The words were dripping with condescension, a final jab that left me feeling invisible, unworthy, and utterly humiliated. I had always known how they saw me, but for some reason, this last insult was the hardest to bear. The message, simple and short, echoed in my head like a scream in an empty room. Maybe next year. It wasn't just about the reunion anymore. It wasn't even about them cutting me out of their lives. It was the way they mocked me, belittled my choices, and acted as though I didn't belong. And this message, this cold, dismissive message, was the confirmation I had been dreading. It was the final insult, the final indication that I would never be enough in their eyes. I tossed the phone onto the sofa and sat down, feeling a dark cloud settle over me. I could feel my heart racing, the heat of anger rising in my chest. But beneath it all, there was a deep, aching pain. Pain that had been building for years. Pain that had been there every time I showed up at a family gathering, only to be treated like an outsider. The years of disapproval, the cold shoulders, the whispers behind my back. It was all too much to bear now. The betrayal felt deeper than ever before, but something shifted inside me. I had spent so long trying to earn their approval, trying to make them see me as worthy of their love. But now, with this final blow, I realized I didn't need their approval. Not anymore. I wasn't going to let them tear me down anymore. I wasn't going to let their cruel words and their exclusion control my life. I had worked hard to get to where I was, to build a life that was mine, on my terms. And I would use this moment, their rejection, as fuel to drive me further. I would show them just how wrong they were. The wedding was the perfect setting for my plan to take shape. I had known I would be treated poorly, but I hadn't anticipated the level of disregard they would have for me. They didn't even bother to hide it. I walked into the reception, and there I was, at a side table, far away from the action, alone, invisible. The entire room seemed to pulse with the mockery of it all. They were having fun, celebrating without me, while I was left to watch from the periphery. I felt the sting of humiliation like a sharp slap to the face. It wasn't just the seating arrangement, it was everything. It was the way they treated me as though I was part of the help, as if my presence didn't matter at all. But in that moment, something inside me hardened. This was not going to be the end of my story. This was just the beginning of something bigger. I was done being the victim. I was done sitting at the sidelines, hoping for their approval. It was time to take control. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. The past flooded back to me in vivid, painful flashes. The way my father had always looked at me like I was a disappointment. The mocking laughter from my cousins when I tried to talk about my career. The cold shoulders, the whispers. For years I had sought their approval, thinking that if I just tried hard enough, they would see me. But they never did. Now I realized I didn't need them to see me. I didn't need their validation. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with thoughts of how to turn this humiliation into something that would make them regret ever treating me this way. I knew I could make them pay. I would take this pain and use it to fuel my success. I would prove to them that they were wrong about me, that I didn't need them to make it. I would rise above them, and they would be forced to watch as I succeeded without them. The wedding reception continued around me, but I was no longer interested in being a part of it. I was interested in something else now. I was interested in the revenge I had been planning, the revenge that would show them once and for all that I was more than they ever gave me credit for. As I walked through the hall, I felt the eyes of my family on me, but this time I didn't look away. I didn't shrink under their gaze. I walked with purpose. I was done being the outsider. It was time to take back my power. I knew my next move. I could already see it in my mind, each step leading me closer to the ultimate confrontation. I would make them see me, not as the failure they thought I was, but as the woman who would come out on top. But as I made my way through the hall, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from my father. The message was simple but devastating. "No Blake serves coffee." I read those words over and over, my heart sinking. My father was giving me an ultimatum. If I wanted to be part of the family, I had to give up my last name. Blake. This was it. The final blow. The last thread of their control over me. But instead of breaking me, it solidified my resolve. I stood outside my father's office, my fingers curling around the door handle. The penthouse-sized building loomed before me, but inside, the reality of the past years hit harder than anything else. The rejection from my family, their cold treatment, their dismissive laughter. All of it led to this moment. The moment I had to stand in front of him and prove I wasn't the little girl he thought I was. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The weight of the door closing behind me felt like it sealed off the world, leaving only me and him. "Lacey," he greeted without looking up, as if I were just another inconvenience. I clenched my jaw. "I need to talk to you." He raised an eyebrow, still not meeting my eyes. "About what?" "I'm done being the person you think I should be. Done pretending I need your approval." The words came out colder than I'd intended, but it was too late to take them back. I wasn't here to apologize. I was here to be heard. His eyes finally met mine, but there was no warmth, only a calculating, cold assessment. "You know the family rules, Lassie," he said, his tone dismissive. "If you want to be part of us, you'll need to let go of that name, Blake. It's too much of a reminder of your failure." Failure? The word hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. "You want me to abandon everything I am just so I can fit into your vision of success?" I shook my head. I'm not doing that anymore." I could feel the old wounds opening up, the sharp sting of his words, the echoes of his disdain for the path I'd chosen. Growing up, I was never enough for him, not when I decided to leave the family business, not when I pursued a career in hospitality. To him, it was never enough. The contempt in his voice, the disapproval, it all came rushing back. Every moment I had spent trying to earn his respect, only to have it thrown back in my face. 16 years ago, I recalled. "Lassie, you're just a waitress. This is where you belong. Don't expect anything more." The memories of my father's harsh words from years ago rang in my ears, but this time, they didn't break me. Instead, they ignited something deep inside me. "I'm not going to do it, Dad. I'm done with the Blake name. I'm done with your rules," I said, standing taller, the resolve in my voice sharper than I had ever allowed it to be before. "I'll carry my mother's name, Holloway." For a moment he stared at me in disbelief. The silence between us thickened, but this time I didn't feel small. I felt like I was finally stepping into my own power. "This is your choice," he said coldly, but I saw a flicker of something else in his eyes, something I hadn't expected. Maybe it was regret, maybe something else. But it didn't matter. He had made his choice, and now I had made mine. I turned my back on him without a word. There was nothing left to say. I had been exiled by blood, but now I carried my mother's name proudly. I was choosing to live for me, not for their expectations. The first step was done, but the hardest part was yet to come. As I walked out of his office, my thoughts raced. I wasn't just changing my name, I was changing my entire future. From here on out, I would be Lacey Holloway, a woman who didn't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all her family. But even as I thought about my future, a headline from the past loomed over me like a storm cloud. "Former diner waitress finds success in hospitality," it read. That headline still haunted me. The media didn't see me as the success I was. They saw the underdog, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks, trying to make it in a world that didn't want her. I gritted my teeth, knowing that they would never see me for who I truly was. But I didn't need their approval either. My success would speak for itself. Back in my office, I stood before the mirror. The woman I saw in the reflection was someone different now. No longer the girl who shrank under their judgment. I was the woman who had taken control, who had made the choice to no longer be their puppet. I felt a sense of power growing inside me, swelling with every step I took. The battle wasn't over, but I had already begun to change the course of my life. And now, it was time to show them just how much they had underestimated me. I had broken free, and the world was about to see who Lacey Holloway really was. The door clicked shut behind me with a soft but final sound. My father's office was bathed in a cold, sterile light, the silence almost suffocating. He was sitting at his polished mahogany desk, a symbol of everything he had built, everything I had once hoped to be part of. But now, the space between us felt insurmountable, as though a chasm had opened up that I could never cross. "Sit down, Lacey," he said, his voice clipped. I didn't move immediately. I was aware of the weight of the situation, of the ultimatum hanging in the air. His eyes were cold, focused, as if this was just another negotiation, another business deal to close. But to me, this was something far more personal. Finally, I took a seat across from him, my heart pounding in my chest. The words I had rehearsed in my mind felt distant now, lost in the heaviness of the moment. "You know what this is about," he continued, leaning forward slightly. "You either renounce that name, Blake, and make a real choice, or you'll have no place in this family. I can't have you dragging our legacy down." His words hit me harder than I expected. The sting was immediate, cutting deep into the years of strained love and his complete disregard for my choices. I thought of everything I had sacrificed, the years of rejection, the quiet humiliation at every family event. It all led to this point, a final test of my loyalty to a family that had never fully accepted me. "I'm not going to give up my name," I said, my voice steady, though it felt like I was shouting inside. "I'm not your puppet anymore, Dad. I've made my own way, and you can't take that from me." The disappointment in his eyes was palpable. He sat back, a slight smirk pulling at the corners of his mouth, as if he already knew how this was going to end. "Then you've made your choice," he said, his voice cold, final. I stood up abruptly, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Yes, I have," I replied, my words sharp. "I choose myself." 16 years ago, I had been that little girl, desperately trying to please him. I had spent so many years seeking his approval, doing everything I could to fit into the mold he had created for me. But those days were over. His demands were no longer my chains. I thought back to those early days, to the harsh words he had always aimed at me, how he had belittled my dreams, how I had tried so hard to make him proud, only to be met with disapproval. Hospitality? That's not a real career, Lacey. You need to think bigger. He had been so convinced that I would fail, and I had allowed him to shape my every move. But now, I was no longer that girl. I didn't need his validation. I didn't need any of them. My success, my identity, was mine to create, not theirs to dictate. "Exiled by blood, named by love," I whispered to myself as I looked at my reflection in the glass of his office. I could almost see the woman I was becoming in the mirror, her posture taller, her eyes filled with a quiet fire. I took a deep breath, my decision echoing in my mind. I would leave the Blake name behind. I would embrace my mother's legacy, Holloway. And just like that, I knew this would be the moment everything changed, The family I had once longed to be a part of had now given me the freedom to break away from them. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. With my mind set, I left the office, stepping into the cool night air of the city. I was filled with a sense of power, a freedom I hadn't felt in years. The weight of the rejection I'd suffered still lingered, but it no longer defined me. It no longer held me back. The media had already started picking up on my story, drawing attention to the past I'd tried to leave behind. A headline appeared that morning: "Former diner waitress finds success in hospitality." It was a reminder that I wasn't just a success. I was the underdog who had fought for everything. They had no idea what was coming. As I made my way to my penthouse, I felt the first stirrings of the battle ahead. My father's rejection had only strengthened my resolve. I was ready. The world would soon know the woman I had become, and my family would be forced to reckon with the woman they had once tried to break. But I couldn't help but wonder, how far would they go to try and keep me down? How far would I go to make them see me for who I truly was? I sat in my office, the glow from my desk lamp illuminating the keys of my laptop. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, hesitation gnawing at the edges of my resolve. The email draft was ready. Everything was in place. I was about to do it, about to expose the truth my family had been hiding from the world. The weight of the decision pressed down on me, heavier than I ever imagined. But I knew this was the only way forward. There would be no more hiding in the shadows. The world would know who I was, what they had done to me, and how I had risen above it all. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. With a click, I hit send. Anonymous no more, I thought, as I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running from the truth. I was running towards it. The next morning, the world woke up to the truth. The exposé went viral. The family's carefully cultivated image started to crack. Headlines flooded the internet, some calling me a victim of a powerful, manipulative family, others questioning the timing of the reveal. It didn't matter. The truth was out there, and for once, it was my truth. But the repercussions came swiftly. My family reacted with fury, as expected. They tried to discredit me, painting me as a disgruntled, attention-seeking daughter who was simply lashing out. Their response was calculated, desperate to save face. They framed my exposé as an attempt to reclaim relevance. And yet, as they twisted the narrative, I couldn't help but feel a spark of satisfaction. For years, I had been the target of their manipulation. Now, the tables had turned. They weren't in control anymore. I was. Then, the personal blows began. I was excluded from the memorial for my mother. Not that I was surprised. After everything, I was still an outsider, even in death. The hurt from that moment ran deep, reopening wounds I had buried long ago. But it was different now. I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table anymore. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I began to assert myself. The moves at work, the decisions in my personal life, they were all mine now. I was no longer just a product of my family's expectations. I was becoming my own woman. But the media didn't make it easy. An old headline resurfaced, dredging up my past as a waitress, a job I had long moved beyond. My family, particularly Darlie, seemed to take pleasure in this, using the media to push me back into a box they had long tried to fit me into. Silence was the price for belonging, I thought, as I realized that even Shannon had been forced to remain silent, siding with the family's narrative rather than mine. The betrayal stung more than I cared to admit, but it was fuel, more fuel for the fire that was growing inside me. I walked outside my office, the early morning sun kissing my face as I absorbed the weight of it all. The public scrutiny was relentless, but it no longer terrified me. It only made me stronger. Every attack, every criticism, only made me more determined to prove myself. But I knew the family wouldn't back down easily. Their next move was already in motion, and I wasn't about to sit idly by while they tried to rewrite the story. Then came the bombshell, the ultimate twist. I didn't wait for them to come for me. I took control of the narrative. I revealed that the $160 million venue they were using for their event, one they had so carefully selected to humiliate me, was mine. It was a calculated move, and it hit them hard. They couldn't erase me. I was no longer the pawn in their game. I was in control of the very ground they tried to stand on. As the chapter closed, I felt the tension between us intensifying. My family, rattled and desperate, would stop at nothing to take me down, but I was done playing their game. This time I was calling the shots. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The clock on my desk ticked steadily as I sat in the office, alone in the quiet of the night. My fingers hovered over the keys, the weight of my next move pressing down on me. This wasn't just another step. It was the step. The moment when everything would change. I knew the stakes. The family was waiting, watching, ready to tear me apart for exposing their lies. But this was no longer about them. This was about me. About taking back control. I had already revealed my truth, but now I was about to tell the world the full story. The email draft stared back at me. I'd prepared everything: photos, emails, records. The evidence was undeniable. I had spent years being silenced, manipulated, and smeared by the very people who were supposed to love me. Tonight, that would end. The world would see the truth. I clicked send. The next morning, the world knew. The media exploded with the news. Headlines spread like wildfire, some sympathizing with me, others questioning my timing. But they all shared one thing in common. My story was out. The family's carefully constructed narrative was falling apart. I watched the reactions unfold, and despite the surge of anxiety that gripped me, I felt exhilarated. This was what I'd been waiting for, to be seen, to be heard. But the retaliation was swift. My family went into damage control mode, trying to paint me as a bitter, attention-seeking daughter. They were desperate, and I was done playing their game. Then the real pain began. At my mother's memorial, I was once again cast aside. The feeling of exclusion, of being made to feel like an outsider in my own family, cut deep. But this time, it was different. I wasn't begging for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to let their rejection define me. Instead, I focused on what I could control. Slowly but surely, I began to take ownership of my life, of my success. It wasn't just in business, it was in every aspect of my existence. The confidence that had eluded me for so long began to bloom. But my family wasn't done. They dug deeper, trying to manipulate the public perception even further. They brought up my past, a job I once had as a waitress, something I had long left behind. They thought they could humiliate me, but they didn't know me. Not anymore. Shannon, my sister, stayed quiet. The silence she was forced into only solidified my suspicions. She had chosen sides, and I wasn't on her team. The betrayal hurt more than I had expected, but it was also the push I needed. They thought they had control, but now I was playing by my own rules. One morning, I went for a walk outside my office. The sun was just rising, warming my skin, and for the first time in weeks, I felt calm. I was no longer their pawn. The weight of my past, the hurt, was still there, but now I carried it with a sense of power. Then came the bombshell, the final twist. My family had unknowingly booked a lavish event at a venue I owned. They were preparing to use it to further humiliate me. But I was one step ahead. The place they thought they controlled, I owned. It was my move now. As the day wore on, I saw them scrambling, trying to salvage what little dignity they had left. They had no idea what was coming. But I did. I was ready. This was my moment. The family was about to learn exactly what it meant to cross me, and as the tension between us grew, I could feel the shift. I wasn't the woman who had been cast aside anymore. I was the one in control, and they had no idea what they were about to face. I watched from the corner of the room, the familiar arrogance radiating from Darlie as she gave orders to the staff. "Tell housekeeping I want roses," she said. her voice dripping with entitlement. It was so typical of her, like nothing had changed. She still thought she was in control. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. I had taken control long ago, and now she was walking around, oblivious to the fact that the real power lay with me. She had no idea. As I silently observed her, my mind was already working. I gave the staff a subtle nod. It was time to make my move. Darlie had no clue what was coming. She still thought she could treat everyone like they were beneath her. But tonight, things would be different. I had the reins now. The staff, trained to follow my lead, made sure that her requests were dealt with. With a calm, measured look, I watched them guide Darlie to her room. It wasn't just any room. The door clicked shut behind her, and a wave of satisfaction washed over me. The small, dingy room she had once mocked, now it was hers. A fitting punishment, if I do say so myself. I smiled, feeling the weight of everything I had endured fall off my shoulders. This wasn't revenge. This was about reclaiming what was mine, what had been stolen from me all these years. I watched as Darlie struggled, her eyes wide as she realized the truth. The room was small, nothing like the lavish suite she expected. I stood back, my heart racing. It wasn't about humiliating her. It was about showing her that I was no longer beneath her, that I could not only match her arrogance but surpass it. The power dynamics had shifted. Darlie didn't realize it yet, but she was no longer the one calling the shots. I was. I watched her carefully, noting how her confidence started to crack. The weight of her own arrogance was finally catching up to her. As she fumbled to adjust her expectations, I felt a mix of satisfaction and relief. The woman who had always looked down on me, who had called me an outsider, was now beginning to feel that sting. The tables were turning. The door to the hallway opened, and Darlie's voice echoed out. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, but there was no one around to hear her complaints. No one except me. I wasn't about to make my presence known, not yet, but I watched every moment unfold, knowing that Darlie's carefully constructed narrative was starting to fall apart. Darlie had always been the golden child, the family's shining star, but she wasn't shining anymore. As her carefully built walls crumbled, she was left exposed, vulnerable, and uncertain. It was a long time coming, and I, for one, wasn't sorry to see it. The truth was finally coming out. The lies, the manipulation, the control, everything she had done to keep me in my place was unraveling, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story anymore. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about reclaiming my future. I was done letting them hold the pen. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Orenthal had reached out. His message was as expected. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to fix the damage, to restore the image of the family that had been shattered. I read his words, the desperation in them clear. "Lacey," the message began, "I know I've hurt you. I want to make things right. Please come back to the family." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words. The sincerity was there, but it was buried under the same old manipulation. He wasn't sorry for what he had done to me. He was sorry because he couldn't control me anymore. He wanted me to fall back into line, to accept the family's terms, to do what they wanted, and pretend like everything was okay. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the little girl who longed for his approval. I wasn't going to be his puppet. His apology was too little, too late. "I don't need you to be proud of me anymore," I whispered to the empty room. His words, his apology, it didn't matter anymore. I had moved on. I didn't need him. Not now. Not ever. And with that, I made my decision. I rejected his plea. I wasn't going to fund their charity. I wasn't going to play by their rules. I wasn't a pawn in their game anymore. It was time for me to finally break free, to sever the last ties that bound me to them. The final act of rebellion came with a sense of finality. No more manipulation, no more pretending. I was done. I wasn't going to be their puppet anymore. And as I turned away from my phone, I knew that I had finally taken control. The next move was mine. The night was silent in my office. The glow of the computer screen illuminated my face as I hovered over the send button, my finger trembling slightly. This email would be my final step in taking back control. I had kept my story buried for so long, but now it was time to expose the truth. No more hiding. I wasn't just revealing my family's lies. I was finally making them face the consequences of their deceit. As I pressed send, a wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of anger. This wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about the years of manipulation, the years I spent feeling like a victim. The public would know who they really were now. Darlie's false narrative would no longer be their weapon. She would have to face the fallout. The next morning, the media erupted. The truth about my past, the lies they'd told about me, were finally out in the open. My phone buzzed nonstop as friends and strangers alike shared their thoughts. Some were sympathetic, seeing me as a victim. Others were skeptical, questioning the timing. It didn't matter. I had done what I needed to do. The weight I had carried for so long was finally lifted, but I knew the repercussions would come fast. I could already hear the whispers of my family in the background. As I expected, their retaliation began immediately. They'd tried to silence me for so long, but now the truth was public. They couldn't manipulate the narrative anymore. I had control of the story, and they hated it. Darlie's perfect image started to crack as my story spread. For once, it wasn't just my voice being ignored. I was finally being heard. But their reaction was predictable. They retaliated with a silence I wasn't sure I could handle. Orenthal called, his voice full of contrition, but it didn't take long for me to realize his apology wasn't genuine. He didn't care about the hurt he caused. He cared about saving face. He had been the mastermind behind so much of the manipulation, and now that it was all falling apart, he was trying to salvage what little dignity he had left. His apology came too late. "I don't need your apology," I said quietly, knowing that there was nothing he could say that would undo the years of pain. "You don't get to control me anymore." His attempts to reconnect with me were meaningless. The damage had been done. As much as I once longed for his approval, I no longer needed it. The person I had become, the person I had fought to become, was beyond their grasp now. I was free. It wasn't just Orenthal, though. I had to deal with the rest of my family. Darlie's smug face flashed in my mind. She had been so sure of her power. She still walked around, treating people like servants, oblivious to the fact that I was the one pulling the strings now. She still tried to command her space, barking orders to the staff as if she were in charge. "Tell housekeeping I want roses," she snapped, with that same entitled tone I had come to hate. But I wasn't fazed. I had a plan, and it was already in motion. I made sure that Darlie would be assigned to the room she had mocked, the smallest, least impressive one in the venue. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had built herself up by stepping on everyone else, and now I was returning the favor. I watched from a distance as her face twisted in confusion when she saw where she was placed. There was no need to say anything. Her humiliation was the point. The power had shifted. I could see it in her eyes. For the first time, she realized she wasn't in control anymore. The satisfaction I felt was hard to describe. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't the weak, invisible person they had always seen me as. I was someone with power now, and no one could take that from me. But the fallout continued. The media exposed more of Darlie's lies, unraveling her carefully constructed persona. She was no longer the flawless, privileged member of the family. Her story, the one she had spent years building, collapsed under the weight of my truth. I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. This was the moment where everything changed. As I thought about what had come before, Orenthal's hollow apology, Darlie's smug attitude, the media circus, I realized something. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I had walked away from the past, severed the chains that had held me for so long, and now I could finally walk forward on my own terms. The final blow came when Orenthal tried once more to manipulate me, asking for money to fund the family's charity. He had the gall to say, "Help us be proud of you," publicly. but there was no way I was going to fall into that trap. I had nothing to prove to them anymore. "I won't be your puppet anymore," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "You'll never control me again." This was the end of that chapter, the beginning of something new. The air felt thick, heavy, as I stood across from Orenthal. His face, once a constant in my life, now seemed like a distant shadow. The words he spoke fell flat in my ears, like stale air in an empty room. "Help us be proud of you publicly," he repeated, his voice strained, as if he believed his plea could still bind me. His words, the same ones he had used for years, were laced with the desperation of a man who could no longer control what he had lost. I stood still, my eyes cold. He thought I would cave, thought I would do what I had done for years, bend, twist, become the daughter he wanted. But I wasn't her anymore. "You can't guilt me anymore, Orenthal," I finally said, my voice steady, unwavering. "I'm done with this. All of it." His apology was too late. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. There would never be enough apologies, enough remorse to undo the years of manipulation, of watching him use me as a pawn in his games. His public persona, intact as always, meant nothing now. I was no longer the girl searching for approval. I watched his face fall, the mask slipping. It was a look of defeat I had never seen on him before. And yet, in that moment, I felt nothing but the weight of finality. Turning my back on him felt like shedding a layer of skin I'd worn far too long. For so many years, I had been bound by a name, by expectations, by his manipulation. But now, there was freedom in rejecting him. There was strength in knowing I would never again be the person they tried to make me. The decision to walk away wasn't just about rejecting their request for money. It was a statement, a loud, definitive choice to live my life on my terms. It was the last shackle breaking. As I walked away from him, a sense of calm washed over me. I wasn't running, I was moving forward. The sadness of rejection lingered, but it no longer had the power to chain me. I knew the road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I was ready for whatever came next. There was still pain from what I had lost, my family, my old identity, but it no longer consumed me. The freedom I had gained was far greater than anything I had once been. And in this space, I could breathe. I was finally my own person. I took a deep breath, staring into the distance. The future loomed large and undefined, but the one thing I knew for certain was that it was mine to shape. As I stand here today, I realize that life is a constant series of choices. Each of us faces moments that challenge us, whether it's the weight of family expectations, the pressures of society, or the fear of stepping into the unknown. But let me tell you something. Your story is yours to write. The power to redefine your future is always within you. You don't need permission from anyone to live the life you deserve. I spent years seeking validation from people who didn't see me for who I truly was. I let their judgment shape me, let their voices drown out my own. But I learned that true power comes from within, from knowing who you are and having the courage to stand by it, no matter the cost. So, I want to leave you with this. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? What would it take for you to take control and live for yourself? I encourage you to think about it and start taking those small steps toward your own freedom. If this video has touched your heart, leave a comment below or let me know where you're watching from. And hey, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. If you didn't like this video, I'd love to know why and where you found it. Let's keep the conversation going. Together, we can learn and grow.